Hello Storytellers, welcome to Bound by Words. My name is Madii. If we haven't met yet, I am a freelance editor and fantasy writer. All of my information is down below if you wanted to connect with me on Instagram or get a free sample edit from my website. But today we are talking about two different types of author platforms you can have, what the difference is, why it's important, and why it could affect your engagement and sales. We are not talking about choosing a social media platform or anything like that. This is more geared towards the content you're posting as an author and what kind of an audience it brings in. So if you write novels, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I post writing related videos twice a week and then live streams and writing vlogs around the Camp NaNoWriMo months. But without further ado, we want to talk about why it's important to differentiate and intentionally pick one of these two types of author platforms. The first type of author platform is the type where you share your writing process, where you share daily word counts, writing aesthetics, where you share your editing process, where you share how you're breaking down your novel and making changes. You might share how you got proof copies and what you're doing with beta reader feedback. I feel like this is really common, and the type of people that this is going to draw in is other writers. If you post that kind of content, it is great, especially if you are, being authentic and original. You're going to get a lot of positive feedback from other writers and people who are writing, which is fine. We read too. That is wonderful. But the other type of platform is if you're posting reading-related content, like books that your book might be similar to, books that inspired you to write that book, maybe the aesthetic of, where do you sit when you read and review? How do you really view your characters? Is there fan art? Are there specific songs or aesthetics that you think fit with your novel? That is going to resonate most with readers. A lot of people will generally have a mix of these two things, and that's okay because, writers read too, but I will say that the people who read, and that is exclusively their hobby, have more time to read, and, as writers, we want to sell more books, but even not really talking about the sales, we want more people to enjoy our books and talk about them and experience them. So the only way to really get that kind of exposure is to get in front of an audience of readers. So I always recommend starting off any kind of author platform early. As soon as you're starting, maybe finishing a first draft or starting a writing and publishing journey, as soon as you know that you want to publish books, you should start your author platform because it's going to take time to grow. And that is a whole separate topic that if you want to hear me talk about, make sure you hit the subscribe button and also the thumbs up while you're down there. But the reason I bring that up is because if you are in the early stages of your novel, you want to publish, you're getting your author platform ready, and you don't know yet exactly, what fan art would look like, if your character's description might still be up in the air, if you don't know what books yours might be similar to, if you're not good at or don't have the time really to read other books and rate and review other books because you're working so hard on your draft, then it is wonderful to start your author platform early on with the intention of grabbing a writing audience, because that writing audience is going to be a great support system as you write. It's going to be a great place for inspiration and motivation. But I will say that the writing side of social media platforms tends to be a lot smaller than the reading side. There are a lot of readers who don't actually even consider writing. They just enjoy reading and consuming those stories. So they are two totally different things you have to market to. So if you are starting off and you're choosing to go that author side route, know that you're missing out on a whole other side of, marketing and that where you want to be with your book. So I read an article a long time ago, and I couldn't tell you where it was from, but it was sort of a list of the best authors' Instagram pages. And one of them, I'm pretty sure it was Carrie Maniscalco, but they were saying that the reason her Instagram page was so strong is because looking at it, you wouldn't have known that she was a writer unless you were reading all the nitty gritty about when she would post a stack of books in a certain genre or with a certain trope, hers would be included, or because she had her book information in her bio. But overall, she promoted, reading and reading aesthetics and other books that were similar to catch the eye of people who wanted to purchase her book. So there are two distinct types of author platforms that are both, amazing and beneficial in different ways, and they come into play a lot in different ways. But it's important to be really aware of sort of where the content you're creating falls. So if you want to get the attention of a lot of writers, then you either want to post all or mostly writing content. If you want to get the attention of a lot of readers, you want to post all or mostly reading content. And one of the reasons this is important, other than these are the audience who are going to see your book launch, Another reason is that the algorithm will generally show things that you post to the people who regularly engage with your content, and if you post something that is very different from what you normally post and the people who normally engage with your content don't like it, that tells the algorithm that what you posted was bad and they will not show it. For example, if you posted something that was really strong content for a great reader audience to a platform that had a really strong writing audience and you just didn't get as many likes or, shares to stories or shares to other people, then the algorithm's going to think that that information was bad and the content was bad because the audience you currently have didn't really respond the same way. But you were not targeting the audience you currently had, you were targeting the audience you wanted to have. Which is why choosing between these two platforms, or even just being aware of these two platforms, is really important. So a lot of professionals recommend across social media platforms, and each one is different, but they always recommend having a certain number of content pillars. So for example, if you have like 3 content pillars, you have 3 things that you regularly post about, it would be like writing, reading, editing, just throwing that out there. So if you are sharing content with the intent to get people's eyes on either your personal brand as an author or your book, you definitely want one of those pillars to be reading. But as you experiment with those content pillars and you see which ones work for you, which ones you enjoy posting in, which ones you get a lot of engagement from, because you might want to post reading content, but the writing content you post might get a lot more feedback, it might be more interesting. So definitely experiment and poke around with what does well on each platform for you personally, because it's going to be different for everybody. Everyone has their own strong suits. But I can't recommend enough being aware of the type of content you're posting and who is interacting with it. For example, if you're posting something reading related, whether it's book reviews or your next TBR or, books that you thought were interesting, see who is liking it, like click on their profiles and look at the stuff they post. Because even though the algorithm for every social media changes regularly, often it does have something to do with, who is interacting with your stuff and how they're interacting. That's like how Instagram and TikTok, that's how they're getting people to stay on and be interested in their platform. So make content. Look at the accounts that are like reacting to that content and engaging with your content and see if that's the audience that you want to have. And if it's not, I would tweak that early on and help you grow early on so that you're not accidentally ending up with the opposite kind of audience. There are a lot of benefits to both sides of this, whether you have a writing audience or a reading audience, but there is a murky area in the middle that isn't going to do as well. There are a lot of people who have really strong writing accounts who might sell a ton of books to writers who've been following their platform or readers who are starting to catch a whiff of this is the aesthetic, this is how I planned, and there's a big draw, I think, now to being open and honest and transparent. Something that I see, selling really well on Instagram and TikTok and just reels and videos and even YouTube is authors being honest and appearing human. There were a lot of books that I read in high school where I couldn't tell you if the person who read it was a girl or a boy. I had no idea who they were. I wasn't attached to the writer at all. I was attached to the story. So there is a little bit more of a shift nowadays where people want to get attached to the writer. I, as an adult, have more writers that as soon as I see their name, I'm interested in what they have written because I like things that I read in the past, but I also like, their presence on social media. So that's definitely a good option. I also think books can sometimes be talked about for a longer period of time on the writing audience side rather than the reading audience side. The great thing about having a reading audience is that because those communities are generally larger, you'll probably get your book in front of more eyes. But I feel like readers' hearts are very short-lived because they're going to read a book and they're going to love it and they're going to move on and read another book and love it. And unless you're in that top % of their favorites, you're not going to get a lot of reference, moving forward unless you are really passionately loved by them. And you are going to have some readers who love your content like that. But it's just like the pros and cons balance. So your content might live longer, get a little bit more attention, but have a smaller audience on the reader side. And then on the writer side, it would be a little bit more short-lived, but it would have a much larger sort of reach to people. And I know what you're thinking because I know every writer thinks this when they start posting content. Almost every writer says, well, I want both audiences. I want to have both. And I can tell you now it's going to be really hard to do both well. And it can be done. I know that there are accounts who've done it, but generally, because social media like thrives on niching down and being an expert and a specialist in one type of content, you're not going to get a whole lot of growth when it comes to both, because the way almost every algorithm works is the systems and the software behind the social media are tracking who's interacting and engaging with what pieces of your content to tell you what is performing well. And I know that's like the more technical side, but it is just an author platform in general is mostly technical. It's mostly scheduling posts and organizing content creation and marketing your book and, you know, growing your email list. And it is sort of the nitty-gritty admin work when it comes to writing. But if you are doing both, that means half of your content, half of your audience is going to be responding well to, well, it might not be responding well to the other half. And then vice versa, the other half of your audience is going to be responding well to a different amount of content and not responding well to the other. That's going to be really confusing for the algorithm. It's also going to be confusing because a lot of different social medias will show posts to people who have liked the same thing. So if me and you like the same post on, you know, like the 10 best fantasy reads of this summer, it's going to show other people who liked that our content. So it's sort of connected in that like backwards kind of way, and you'd have to look up each social media platform in detail and like growth strategies to see sort of what the best way to target and use that to your advantage would be. But in general, across the board, every social media and every content creating platform will tell you to niche down tightly so that you are catering to one group of people. So you can't cater to one group of people if you have a writing audience and a reading audience, because those are two very different things. You know, a lot of us writers read a lot, but there are a lot of readers who don't write at all, and they're not going to respond well probably to most of the writing content. But they're both going to respond really well to each of their separate like brands of content. That's what we go on social media for, is to find people that we relate to. So I know it is really enticing to say I'm going to do both, but even if you are a writer and you have your 2 or 3 content pillars, and you know one of them is writing, one of them is reading, one of them is publishing, your reading content will never do as well as your writing and publishing content if your audience is mostly writers. But that's okay, because it's still a pillar of content that is relevant and useful that a lot of writers are going to find interesting. If your content platforms are writing, reading, and publishing, and you know you're getting a lot of good feedback on writing and publishing, and you're getting some feedback on reading, you want to continue to post that, maybe just not as much as writing and publishing. Or, you know, maybe you start with writing, reading, and publishing, and you get really good feedback on reading and publishing from a largely reader's audience, and then you dial back a little bit on the writing content. It's all a little bit of a guessing game, but as you start your platform, even if you're in the middle and you're not sure yet, as you start to post things that you're interested and, you know, excited to share, you're gonna start to be able to very clearly see who is responding to that, and then you want to cling to one of those platform styles. That way that you can grow a little bit quicker, but also have a stronger, more dedicated audience. Something they say about like YouTube specifically is everyone knows these magic numbers, like if you hit 500 you get a community tab, and if you hit 1,000 then you can be monetized. But you have to hit 1,000 subscribers and also 4,000 watch hours. 4,000 hours is a lot, and the only way you're going to hit that number is if you have a really active and engaged audience. So it's not necessarily just the numbers, because you'll see 1,000 and go, they made it, but they might only have 2,000 hours of watch time, so you know they're not really at that monetary mark yet. And the reason I bring that up is because there is some form of that on every social media platform. For example, on Instagram, if you are posting either writing or reading related content, let's say you have a mostly writing audience and you're getting a lot of comments and shares and discussions on your posts, and then you post something reading related and you might get a lot of likes but very little comments and very little shares. That sort of goes into, you know, how often that post is going to be shared and, you know, how fast your account's going to grow. So you don't want to hold yourself back by posting to the wrong audience, but you also don't want to create an entire author platform with the foundation of one audience if what you really want is the foundation of another. That's why I think this is so important to think about early on. It's not necessarily about the marketing and the selling books. It's about, what do you want your platform to look like when you have 1,000 followers? What do you want your platform to look like when you have, you know, a full email list? Whatever you want your platform to look like then, you should start looking at platforms that exist like that now and seeing how they started and how they grew up. if you're looking for a largely reader-based platform, then it would be more beneficial for you to host read-alongs and do book reviews and, you know, categorize books in different genres and by different tropes than it would be to spend all of your time, you know, sharing your book updates or your friends' books that they published, or, you know, sporadically sharing random book content. So even though I think these are two distinctly different author platforms to take, in each one you can narrow down even further. In the rating audience, we have, you know, people who do poetry, we have people who do flash fiction, we have people who do strictly romance, we have people who do strictly fantasy. There are already a bunch of subgenres in each of those categories, so saying that you're going to take on both is like saying you're going to take on all of those subcategories too. And, you know, if that's something you're going to try to do, then I wish you the best of luck. But if you learned anything new or thought of anything differently from this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time.